Good afternoon and good night. My name is Mark Jr. This is Become the Podcast. How do you become anything? You dream, you declare, you commit, and success is your next breath. So I am sitting here with Lonnie Pries. And say your last names. I've always said I wonder if it was Pries or Pries.
Pries.
It's
like,
Pries.
Like a Catholic priest, but drop the T. Pries.
Pries. Okay.
Pries.
So yeah, I've always wanted that for a long time. And I was for a while. I thought it was like Prius, like the I think the car, like
Prius. Yeah.
So Lonnie is our athletic director here at Concordia University, and I told him about how we were going to set up this podcast, and then I said, but I'm going to tell you some stuff actual live. You won't hear it until we actually start recording. And so this is what I heard about you that made me interested in what you would do here at Concordia University as our AD, but also our head football coach. I heard, you can tell me if I'm wrong or not, I heard that when you got the coaching job at River Forest, Illinois, Concordia, River Forest, Illinois, that the team was defeated. Okay, like no wins, and I'm going to give you the whole thing. And then I heard that when you got done, they had an undefeated season, and I heard that it took you 4 years. How much of that is true?
Well, some of it, but I'll explain a little bit. When we came into the football program, it had been around a long time.
Sure.
For years and whatnot.
You played for them?
Yes, I played for them. So it was. It's Concordia Chicago's been there a long time. But they hadn't won a game, I think, in almost 3 years.
Wow.
When we came in. So interestingly enough, the guy who I basically gave the program here to turned it over to Coach Schumacher. He was a senior that spring when we showed up. So I got to coach him, and we had 20 guys that spring. When we showed up, we couldn't even run plays. It was pretty much boot camp.
Yeah.
Which I'm sure you would enjoy. You'd have enjoyed being there and seeing, because I see what you do, and it's a lot of the same stuff. So, but anyways, we hadn't won in 3 years. We went from I think it was 2 wins to 3 wins to 4 wins. I think those first 3 years was almost like that, and then the last 4 years, because I was there 7 years, we had 3 8-2 seasons. 1 conference championship there, and then we were 10-0, made the playoffs last year. So I guess there's some validity to what you heard.
So I hear that, and throughout how many years have you coached here at Concordia? The
football I coached, it was 5.
Okay, so throughout the 5 years, I've been watching and just looking to see, how
4 years. Sorry, I've been here over 5. Coached 4 years.
Okay, so
4 years. Yeah.
So I've always been just watching the football program. As I've been here a long time, so I saw who the first coach was. I saw who the interim coach was, and then you came after the interim coach. I think you're the third head coach, and so I kind of seen everybody's story. I even knew the first coach. I knew about him the first year he was here, and they were just recruiting. They weren't even coaching. So I know about. I'm like a historian when it comes to this stuff.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'm watching you, and so I had this line that I've kind of come up with, and it makes sense to me. It might not make sense to you, but it's a concept on leadership. I've always believed that if the culture must be louder than the leadership, and here's why I think this. I saw a picture of the Spurs. They're in a timeout, and it's like an ESPN telecast, so you can see the time, the quarter. It's just a really cool picture, but it's also got the ESPN graphics on it because it's basically being taken from an actual game. Tim Duncan and Tony Parker are in the huddle in the coaching spot telling guys where to go. And then you see Ginobili kind of pointing his finger at this diagram that was made up by the two players. I think
I know what you're talking about. Yep.
And Popovich is nowhere around. Popovich is nowhere. And so with this idea that the leadership the culture must speak louder than the leadership, what it says to me, if the leader is constantly reminding people how to function or maintain the culture, there's a disconnect. Something isn't working properly, right? But when the culture or the people within the culture can sustain it, and the leader can just lead, it says a lot about everybody understanding their role, the synchronization, everybody be on the same page, so on and so forth. So these last 2 years were key. I was really watching these, right? So you decide to step down in year 4, right? You bring in Schumacher, you groom them, and Schumacher, they go to the national tournament.
Yep.
Correct? So I was like, wow. Coach had such an impact and influence on these guys that even, and I don't want to take anything away from Schumacher, because I'm sure there's a lot of work that goes into, keeping the wheels on the bus and pushing the vehicle along. But I said, man, for you to have stepped away from that and those guys did better or went further, says a lot about your leadership concepts, your infrastructure, your culture, from top to bottom, from the players to the student managers, to interns, to coaches, so on and so forth. And that is what led me to this moment. We talked long time ago, right when school was letting out, I said, hey, we got to rap. Mm-hmm. And so here we are.
Yep.
And so I got some questions for you.
Before you go on, your phrase, culture needs to be louder than the leadership, is that what it was?
Yep.
I completely agree. I found that in that program back in Chicago, the program here, that when you get to that point, when the culture is louder than the leadership, then in my opinion, that you have actually done a good job as a leader, and you've actually identified and empowered those people within your program, whether they're coaches or, as you mentioned, the Spurs players, captains, whatever you want to call them, when they now are obviously speaking louder than what you have been, laying down as a foundation, as the mission, and you're exactly right. I just know that you'll never have the culture be louder or be that loud, especially when it can just go and roll and whatnot, until you spend a lot of time sticking true to what your mission is, what your values are, what you want that culture to be like. Because I think a lot of people say all the right things. We want this kind of culture, we want this kind of program, we want this and that. Yes, it's like what they read in the book. And obviously, most coaches get, and I'm the same, you get a lot of ideas from what you read in books.
Sure.
But if you are not living it out, and if you are not consistent, and if you aren't consistent throughout your staff with it, it'll fall apart and you'll never get it. So it's time consuming, it's exhaustive, it's intense. But yes, it can be done, and it's awesome. I feel very blessed to be part of exactly what you're talking about, to be part of two cultures that have become louder than any one person or any one head coach or whoever.
This is a concept that I like to use a lot, intention. And to live a life of intention, it asks two questions. Number one, how do you want to show up? And how do you want to think about what you're doing? And a lot of people allow their love for coaching, love for leadership, love for mentorship, whatever the case may be, to be circumstantial. So if the people that I'm leading, I like them, then I show up in this way. But if I don't like them, then I show up in this other way. And I'll see a lot of leaders being very circumstantial in how they show up. So what you're talking about is in staying true to values, belief system, mission. You have to decide, this is how I'm going to show up. So by the time you walk out that door, by the time you get out of the vehicle, you have to decide that. And then on top of it, you have to say, how do I want to think about my work? So how you show up is one thing. How do I want to think about my work? You have to be intentional about thinking about the work a certain way. Because if you allow the adversity, the struggles of the work to, I guess, impact your psyche, now all of a sudden you don't like your work, and that's going to have an impact on how you lead.
And exactly what you're saying, when both these two programs, when we first got there, like when we were in Chicago and there's 20 guys, they are watching every word, listening to every word we say, but then, all right, let's see if this guy's really going to bring this kind of energy. Let's see if he's really true to what he's saying when we're getting our butts handed to us, a lot. I mean, we only won, a couple games those first couple years. Here, we won one game that first year. Okay, everybody can, it's easy to say, oh yeah, this is who we are, this is what we believe, and we're going to do this when you're winning every game or you're in every game.
Sure.
It's at that time, and that is when culture, in my opinion, can just, it gets empowered when you have people that are making that decision, like you say, to no matter what happens, no matter how this game goes, no matter how bad we practice, no matter all the crap that's happening on the outside, if we stay true to who we are, and we are going to pour into these guys and give the same amount of energy, and they see that during those crappy times, during the trials, during the tribulation. If you are staying true to what you say, and you're going to make mistakes, and you're going to have to admit that at times, that is when you get people just bought in. Like, oh, I am going to follow. I'm in. If this dude or if this woman, if they can do this and lead in the midst of the crap that we're going through, oh, I'm in this. I'm in this because I know they're gonna pour into me no matter what happens, no matter what the score is and all that. And that is, you're exactly right. People making a decision no matter what the circumstance, they're gonna hold true to what they say they're gonna do.
So here's my first question for you.
Yeah.
Who was the first leadership figure that caught your attention? Family, work, athletics.
Yep. Well, Peter Seamer, sixth grade English teacher and a coach, of course. He was my grade school, basketball coach, and he was. When you talk about intensity, he was like that. I remember him bringing us in, us basketball guys. Not everybody, a bunch of kids were screwing around in an art class. He brings us into the bathroom. And he was honest like a hawk for everything we did. I mean, he lit us up in that boys' bathroom. It's about the size of this room. Yeah. And I just remember he was so intentional about every little detail. And that is another thing that if you're gonna try and change the culture of anything or get people fired up about things, you need to be intentional and intense about every little single detail. And it wasn't just about coaching basketball back then. It was like, it was every little thing we did. We had to, he was honest about how he behaved and all that. The biggest one, though, is Cliff Thompson. I mean, I brought him in here to speak with our staff and our students.
What does Cliff do for a living?
He is now the superintendent over in Sauk Prairie outside of Madison, in charge of, I believe, hundreds of staff and teachers and so on. And he is he's a phenomenal man of God. He is a man that's unique like no other man I've met as far as pouring into me. I will get messages at 4 o'clock in the morning when this guy wakes up, and he's older now. He's in his 60s. Lonnie, Pries, how are you? You are the greatest.
Yes.
You're just pouring over and over. You got to meet him, Marv, and you'd absolutely love him. And he is just somebody who is just heart on his sleeve, passionate. Yeah. He was my head basketball coach in high school, and then we've stayed in touch, and he's now a mentor for me, and just a phenomenal leader, and so humble. So, I mean, I've never heard the guy talk about himself really, or anything he's accomplished. I mean, so humble.
What I was going to ask you who your influences, and you kind of answer that. How do you go about? That's an open-ended question. It's a very broad question. So feel free to just talk your way through it. If you don't, if the bullet points just don't appear, feel free to just talk your way through it and navigate your way through it. How do you go about building? Let's just stick with the athletic culture, the football culture, your team. What's non-negotiable? What's your infrastructure like? How did you attack leadership coming to Concordia?
That is I definitely will not keep the bullets in order anyway.
It's fine.
But no. And I'll just say one other person. I had to mention as you're talking, and I think this is a gentleman who everybody knows, Tony Dungy, who affirmed, in reading his books and listening to him, he affirmed so much of what I've learned through mentors like Coach Thompson and different people. So he's an outside influence going back to that. But so as far as identifying leaders here, just what's a non-negotiable? I think number one, it's it's spending time in the same way that Coach T has invested in me. It is spending time with those people who you identify as potential leaders. I think you have to do that on the front end, and there's a lot of different ways to identify that, whether it's you can do this in a lot of different ways, but once you identify who you want to possibly lead, and in all honesty, that's very hard coming into a program that hasn't had any success, and you don't. So and I think some coaches, here, we've talked about this. I've talked to some coaches here. They've gotten burned a little bit. Come in, take over a program. They've had some great. Walked into a place where, oh my gosh, they got some great. These guys are just taking the bull by the horns. Got some great leaders, and all of a sudden they graduate, and because coaches weren't proactive in identifying, who that next wave of leaders or captains, whatever you want to call it, or even upperclassmen if you don't want to be select. So you got to identify it. Then you got to spend time. I mean, many people, and I was guilty of this way back when I first started almost 30 years ago. Oh yeah, here's our captains. Here we go. Here's some literature. This is what we want you to do. I hear a lot of like captains having these extra responsibilities. Where is the coach sitting down at a table and talking through things, pouring into them, encouraging them, including them with decisions? Doesn't have to be major decisions necessarily, but I have every time I had a captain's or a leadership meeting or whatever we're doing, we have an agenda. I treat them almost like a staff. Include them in what you're doing. So it's taking two words come to mind, Marv. I'm looking at time. It's got to be a commitment of time. If you are not committed as somebody who wants to identify, train leaders, if you're not committed to them and spending time with them, almost like you're committed to having a great marriage, all right, it's not going to be rolling in at night, never spend time or talking. You know how that is. There's a lot of things that ain't going to happen. So, no, you got to commit to that. You got to commit to being a good dad. You got to spend time. If you want to have leader, you better commit to spending time with them. And then the other thing, it's not just, all right, let's just get together and because you can do that a lot of different ways. Sure. Let's go to the movies. Let's go bowling. Let's hang out. Let's read a book together. But then it's giving them opportunity. So spending time, but then giving them opportunity to actually lead, put them in charge of some things, not delegate tasks. I mean, that can be part of it, but to actually give them opportunity to make decisions, give them opportunity to lead other people on their team, give them opportunities to lead each other. I mean, just everything that a head coach on a team would do, finding ways to slowly give these young men or young women opportunities to actually do it. So for me, time and opportunity are essential, and if you're not willing to do that, then you can have your captains go out for the coin toss or the whatever, but you're really not training leaders.
I was having a conversation with another alumni, Phil Corazian. He's I think West Bloomfield. I should know what that school's name is, but he's the head coach. And so we're talking about leadership, and he left out the gym, and I had access to his team, and these boys were awesome. They were vocal. They listened. I would do a drill at one hoop, and then the coaches would disperse to their hoops. Their teams would disperse with the coaches, and then the team members would execute the drills. And then I would bring them all back in. I would tell the coaches, "Listen, you got to listen to me because I'm demonstrating for the kids, but I'm teaching you coaches so that you can go to the rims and do it." And so when I left, I was complimenting them. Said, "Man, listen, you left out the gym, and those boys were spot on. They weren't in the clouds. They were locked in. It was really impressive." And so we started talking about leadership. And you mentioned something that I have not heard this before, okay? I thought this, maybe great minds would think alike, I don't know. But I've not seen this executed, nor have I heard it before, but I've thought it. I know that sounds very braggadocious, but
yeah.
But I've always believed that it's very unfair for you to put players in leadership positions when they haven't been given the opportunities to exercise their leadership ability. You were saying this, and now I have a concept, and I want to know what your concept is, getting a little bit deeper into it. I think that freshmen, sophomore, seniors, and juniors should have different levels of leadership. So your freshmen and your sophomores have to be given some leadership opportunities where they can really F it up. Like they can really mess it up and mess it up bad. And if they mess it up bad, we just keep on going, right? but you give them those opportunities, and I don't know if you're keeping some sort of tally or something like that, but you're definitely giving them opportunities to exercise leadership opportunities, right? As they become juniors, now the stakes become a little higher. Maybe now you might have some coordinating things. You may be dealing with the freshmen and the sophomores, coordinating certain things, and then when you become the senior, now you're like, if this doesn't go right, we lose money. You know what I'm saying? You put them in pressure situations. Now, when you start figuring out who's the leader, you've given people an opportunity to show you, hey, listen, I'm a contributing team member. I'm not a leader, or I'm a good ball player. But you don't want, from an administrative standpoint, I have some limitations, whatever the case may be. But now you can justifiably put kids in position based on what you've allowed them to exercise, and you can also go back and say, listen, Lonnie, freshman year, sophomore year, junior year, we put you in position. These are the results. You know what I'm saying? Obviously I haven't been put in a position as a head coach or anything to do that. You know what I'm saying? So it's just a concept in my head. What do you think about that concept, one? And two, how do you go about developing your leaders? Is it when you become a senior or junior thing, or do you sometimes have a sophomore that's in that position, and how do you decide who gets put in, who gets to set the round table?
Yep. What you just mentioned, and I've been meeting with some of our coaches here, I think it's important, especially at the collegiate level, to identify and include underclassmen, because there are some teams here, there's some times where you may have some underclassmen who are your best natural leaders. I mean, I can think of a couple in the football program right now. So I think it's important to start training them, to start including them in the process as early as possible. Teams now, whether I understand the hesitation with designating them captains, but we're sitting at a table here, leadership council, leadership group. How to identify those? That's obviously something that I think from program to program, it's going to be different. One thing we said, and to go to your the other thing you were talking about, the process. I think it's very difficult to measure and evaluate results necessarily when it comes to leadership, or quantitatively. But if you're talking about, and especially when you're talking about people, as far as growing other people, and ultimately that's what we always strive for, is get our leaders, get our upperclassmen, or get whoever pouring in other people to help them grow. So what we did, and I'm pretty sure Coach Schumacher has probably tweaked this, but is continuing to do this. One thing we started, probably one of the things I was most excited about, is we decided why just identify a handful of people. We want to do this from the get-go. So this is what we did. Freshman year, we came in, we had different coaches take each one of the classes. Freshman year, they came in and they worked with Coach Childers at the time, who's not coaching either. He's our head of admissions. He would take all the freshmen and he would talk about how do you grow yourself. What are your values? What's your mission in life? How do you take care of yourself and make sure you're growing as an individual? All right, sophomore year, I believe it was Coach Rody at the time, takes these sophomores and we train them. We went through almost curriculum on how do you pour into one other person? How do you what does accountability mean? Having an accountability partner, and actually training them on how do you do that? What does that look like? What does that mean? And go through examples and so on. Junior year, we then, with Coach Schumacher, he led them through a series of meetings that talked about, all right, how do you lead a small group of men? You got 5 guys, and I'm a big believer in small groups when it comes to spiritual development or anything. Getting together with a small group of men, another group of players, maybe it's your position group. How do you do that? How do you run a discussion? Is it just you talking the whole time? How do you include other people? How do you troubleshoot when one person is dominating the conversation and you want to hear from everybody else? Because the other thing we built in, by the time our guys were seniors, every senior on our program, and I know some other teams are doing this, we broke team into families. And whether or not you're a captain or not, we included pretty much all the seniors, if we felt comfortable, as leaders of these families. So these families actually had real life, kind of what we had trained them to be. These are real life small groups where you got freshman, sophomore, junior, senior. Let's say this is Marv's family, and I'm giving you, sheets of paper every week. Hey, let me know when you had your meeting. Here's some topics I want you to talk about. And there was some stuff like, some fun competitions we did in camp, and you were in charge of kind of getting your guys assigned to that. But, we had some topics that we wanted our family leaders to lead discussion on with our group. They got to me senior year. We didn't talk about anything with football. We talked about, all right, how are we now going to move on? And you're about ready to step out of here into the real world. Now, how do you become a leader in the community with your family as a husband, and so on. So we actually put something together to do this because, to your point of how do you select who, in reality, it's really kind of on us to try and do the best we can to train these guys up to be leaders, no matter who they are, whether they're the best player, worst player, that doesn't matter. All right, everyone on this program, we're not doing it. We're not doing it right by them if we're not trying to train them so that when they're done, they at least got something. So that when they get out there and they get married and get in the real world,
they
got some kind of leadership foundation. So, we did it. It was one of the things I was most excited about doing. And now what's great is working with some of these other coaches. People ask, how is it leaving football? I'm like, well, I've been able to work with other teams, with players, with some coaches, and just kind of start throwing out some of these ideas we did within the football programs I coached. And now to see, I was just out of women's soccer. They're breaking up into families this year. I've been working with some of their leaders and different. It's exciting because I love the leadership. I love to see people pour into each other, which is ultimately what it is.
There's so many things running through my head, so many directions I want to take.
I can see it in your eyes, but
how much time do you have left?
Probably about 15 minutes.
Okay, the podcast we got about 18 more minutes.
Okay.
So many things that are going through my head right now. At first, I started thinking about purpose. I started thinking about purpose, and purpose is, I think, sometimes leaning into. It's going away from the ego, right, and leaning into something else. I want to say the subconscious, because I think sometimes the subconscious is what we need, right? That's the inner voice, whatever, telling you this is what we need, right? And then the ego is what we want. And I always give the example of a person a person outside of their purpose, meaning the person wants to be the lead singer in the band because the lead singer in the band gets the notoriety. They get the fandom, they get all the perks of being the person lead singer in the band. But that person that's leading the band really should be the producer. She could be an amazing producer. She could change the world as a producer, but she doesn't get seen as much, right? And so when you talk about you taking a step down, and then you talk about this leadership piece, that it's so spot on from a lot of the stuff that I've read. Not saying I'm an aficionado, but the stuff that I've read, the stuff I experienced, the moments in my life where I've been led, and I knew I was being led, versus the times when I'm like, man, this dude's a joker. This dude is a joke, right? And I'm like, there's a trend. When you're being led the right way, there's a trend in the leadership. And I hear you talking about you stepping down. I'm thinking, man, is his purpose to lead? Is his purpose to lead? Because it's fluid. The ideas and the concepts are fluid. There's a process. You talk about it so simplistically that I think you make it easy for people to think they can do it. And good teachers make complicated concepts comprehensive. So you're talking about this very complicated thing. We're not talking about all the different personalities, all their background, all their baggage, all the stuff that you have. But you're making it seem like, Mark, if you just... But I think there's a genius. There's a genius and a genius level instinct that seems to be present as it relates to you, that makes it so easy, that makes these coaches believe, listen, this is how we can develop leaders for our teams. I always like to, with Ricky, the head coach, I always say our job is to develop husbands, fathers, leaders, and professionals. That's our compass. If we're not doing that, then we're not doing a good job. So that's one of the things that I hear. Man, I didn't want to say that because I didn't want to go off on these other tangents because I get lost. But here's another concept that you were talking about with, and you kept saying with. And we throw this concept at you. This is something that I learned, and I think you'll love it too. It's and I'll draw it so no one else can see it, but you can. So there's support, and then there's accountability, right? And so there's these 4, I don't know, squares or whatever. And they say when we give people little support and little accountability, we neglect them. When we give people a high amount of support, but little accountability, we do things to people. So I'm probably writing it wrong, but my ideas are correct. When we give people a lot of support, little accountability, we do things for them. So I'm giving you all the support.
Yeah.
I'm not giving you any accountability. I'm doing things for you. And the 2, I'll go back to the 2. When we give people little support, but we want to blame them for everything, that's when you're doing things to people. You dig me?
Yeah.
When we give people high support, high accountability, now we do things with them.
Yeah.
And I heard this, and so you told me about your process, and you can see it in my eyes. You see, like I'm lighting Marv up, right? This guy was telling me this, and I couldn't keep still. I was just the stories, the images, the experiences. This thing right here is so important, and you've been saying time, Marv. You got to spend time with people. This thing is so important. And I've noticed the moments in my life when I've been successful developing relationships, that time piece, that with piece.
Oh yeah, you could be the smartest person a lot. I mean, you could know football or relationships backwards and forwards. Whatever your craft is, whatever at the moment, whoever you're spending time with, you could know it better than anybody, and be able to answer any question that comes up. But if you aren't willing to spend time with that person or with those people, it's you talk about a joke. I mean, you're a joke as I've been a joke as a dad at times. I've been a joke as a husband at times, because say all the right, oh honey, what's wrong? Oh, I'll do that, and then all of a sudden a week goes by and I don't follow through.
Yeah.
And I think you like to take the word with. I think a word that for me that stands out. Obviously this is coming from the I guess spiritual side of things, is sacrifice. And you talk about who to look towards. I mean, you look at Jesus Christ and his sacrifice for mankind, and it was the greatest sacrifice ever. And I think about the sacrifices that people have to make in order to love them, lead them, train them up to be leaders. Whatever it is you're doing, it takes sacrifice. And I think we are selfish by nature. And I can be the first one to admit it. I think that's the other part that I've learned from these people, like a Tony Dungy, like a Cliff Thompson. You got to be willing to sacrifice and spend time with people, and you got to have humility, because you got to realize that you have these goals, you want to do all these things. The reality of it is our selfish nature at some point is going to come up, and we're going to let those people down. Those same people that we want to lead, those same people that we want to pour into, we are going to let them down at some point, and you got to be humble enough to take that on yourself. And you know what? Talking to my wife, or talking to my kids, or talking to my players, or talking to I dropped the ball there. I didn't spend the right amount of time. I said I was going to, and I didn't follow through. And I also feel that this is, I guess, a characteristic, and I'm going off on a tangent, that if you're going to do this, give support to people and accountability. That a key element, or you want to making a recipe for a good somebody who, this is the kind of leader you want to be. You better have a healthy dose of humility in there, because I've been around a lot of people that say all the right things again and spend time, but never ever would admit to being wrong or making a mistake. Well, you're not going to have many people follow you either, in my opinion. So I know I went off on another tangent.
That's fine.
I had to get that in as you're talking about things. I'm like, yeah.
It's just, again, so many thoughts are going through my head. This conversation goes so many different directions. We got 10 minutes, and I've been doing a terrible job of ending my podcast all smoothly, because I have outro music, and typically I give myself like 30 seconds to do the outro music to nice. Give the debrief and everything. But gosh, man, you said so many cool things. I kind of want to. I don't want to necessarily stick to the script because I want to ask you because you kind of hit on some of this stuff. One of my questions was, let me just talk to the sacrifice piece, and then I'll hit you with this last question, which you've already touched on, and then we'll finish it up. Sacrifice. We all talk about sacrifice, right? As a coach, as a player, whatever. To always talk about sacrifice. But here's the thing that I've learned, and this is me personally. I want to know what you feel about how you teach your boys about sacrifice. If you can't visualize yourself sacrificing, you won't be able to sacrifice in real time. So we always talk about sacrifice, visualize the game, visualize what you want in life, all this other stuff. But when it comes to like committing, sacrificing, persevering, things of that nature, that doesn't get talked about. And I'm like, if you can't see yourself sacrifice, go without, right? Whether it's, I got to go without food to lose this weight. I got to go without socializing so that I can get my studies up. If you don't see yourself, your body, when you start trying to sacrifice, will be like, hold on, bro. We don't do this. What you mean? And your body will literally go into shock, and you won't be able to follow through. So I've always told guys, like, when you think about visualizing, don't just think about the shot, the score, whatever. Think about what it's going to feel like going without these things that could possibly limit you from getting what you want. Because sacrificing is tough, and we throw it around like it's you got to sacrifice, man. Well, that's tough, especially if you ain't never seen nobody in front of you sacrifice. How do you attack sacrificing? Is this,
That's a great point. And I love what you said about trying to have guys visualize it. I think the other thing, and I've talked to some of our coaches here, and I know I have had coaches hold me accountable for this, is when you're actually doing as well, when you're actually practicing whatever it is you are doing, that you need to actually, and I use the word uncomfortable. You as a coach, in whatever arena you're in, you need to make your players uncomfortable to the point so they can start to actually feel some of that sacrifice, or what it means to sacrifice. And one of that piece is not just talking about it, which is very important, like you said, to visualize, but then actually start to do it. And I know you'll never be able to simulate what that's going to mean in the middle of competition, or what it's going to mean like when you can't simulate, the sacrifice you might have to make if you have a tragedy in the house, or within your family. You can't do that, but you got to think about it, and you got to embrace it when it comes, and you got to realize, and it is all throughout the Bible. You talk about great books to read. I mean, it is all throughout the Bible about all the growth that takes place through those trials and through those times when I think God is getting us ready for bigger things that we have to go through, as well as a coach should be getting their athletes, or a dad should be getting ready, not putting them through purposely, you know what I mean, purposely giving them a hard time, but embrace. And then when those things hit, because they're going to hit, talking through it, visualizing it, we're going through this right now, and here's some of how we're going to be stronger. I mean, I just think about and this is going on a tangent, but as I talk to my own kids, as they start, they're at the age.
That's a good. That was my last question. So go ahead.
They're at the age of dating, which I know you're just, and you're good looking guy, Marv. Better looking wife. You're going to have some issues. So, and I definitely got a better looking wife. As our kids start to date, here's an example. As they go through things that you don't know, they start to date, they start to get, or just friends, and people, because we all make mistakes, people hurt them. People don't pour into them like we're talking about. They don't give them. They're not with them as much as they should be to make them feel good about themselves, and they get hurt. And then when that happens, to talk through this, this trial, to talk through and help them realize that you're going to get through this, and in the midst of this, this is also God preparing you. You're getting ready for being able to maybe deal with. There's a purpose behind this. Yeah. It may be God. It may be something that you experience. It may be something one of your kids experiences, or your roommate in college experience, that you are ready to help them because of what you've gone through. So, whether in coaching, we kind of make these situations happen so that we can talk them through in the middle of practice and making them feel uncomfortable and making them get a taste of what it really means to sacrifice, or we just deal with the real life stuff in our families. there's always a purpose. And that's something I truly believe that in the midst of it, sometimes I just want to figure this out. I just want to get through this. I'm mad. I'm not, and then all of a sudden at the end of it or down the road, I realize, okay, there's a reason for it. And I think with some of the programs I've, gone through and some of the stuff I've gone through in my own personal life.
This is the reason why.
Yes.
Today's always the reason why.
God shows at some point. Sometimes it's the next day. Sometimes it's a year down the road. Sometimes it's 10 years down the road. Oh yeah, I can handle this. I can sacrifice now in this situation. I can spend this time with the people I need to spend because of I've seen how important it is because of things I've gone through in the past.
Romans 8:28, for we know that all things work for the good of those who love the Lord and have been called according to his purpose. If he will make all things good, and I think all things usable. So all experiences will be usable. So all of that led to this fluid approach to leadership. But even today, what does today lead to down the line? You just never know. So I thank you so much. We got 3 minutes. You have to somewhere down the line give me another, because there's so many. I got, I gave you 6 questions.
Yeah.
I didn't even hit on some of these other ones because I would like to know about building leaders professionally. Because now you're dealing with the ego of I'm a coach. I'm a coach and I'm an adult. And now how do you mold that person? How do you push and pull? How do you, take it easy on certain people? What things are non-negotiable? When do you force your hand? And not necessarily get into like actual ongoings with your staff or anything, but I think it's one thing to build young adults or children. It's another thing to build established, degreed adults. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And then be dealing with people who may be your age, maybe slightly younger than you in your age bracket, and then young people, and being able to foresee. This is a young coach. Just not too long ago, they was probably doing this on Saturday and whatever. How do I protect them from themselves? How do I lead them? And so I don't want anything. I know you probably just gave me. You probably in your mind just came up with a bunch of answers. But hopefully we can have another talk and save some content because I have so many questions.
Oh sure.
So you're going to see me now end this thing off, all right? You're going to see me end this thing off. So I go through my little mantra, all right? Here it is. So listen, thank you again, Coach Pries, for rapping with me. I appreciate it. I don't know. Now, once I get done with this, I'll send it to you.
Okay.
And then you look braggadocious. Like, listen to this podcast I was on. Like, what do you mean? Like, I was talking. Somebody's asking me for my expertise. You want to share it with people, but you're basically saying, listen to my genius. You know what I'm saying? So you figure out how you want to.
I've never used the word genius with my name, but
I use it a lot. Like I think I've used it in this podcast, so I'll get it to you. But thank you so much. Greatness lives on the edge of death. I'm not afraid to die. I will fight for my dreams. I will celebrate my dreams, and I will die for my dreams. Thoughts are things, and everything starts off as a thought first, and springs from a place of mindfulness and clarity. Thank you again for listening. My name is Mark Fox Jr. I am done.
It makes it easier to bear. Yeah. You won't regret it, no. Some girls, they don't forget it. Love is their home, happy in there.